All right, let's dive deep into a lost world. I mean, really deep, to uncover the story of a creature that sounds like something straight out of a monster movie. We're talking about the largest snake that ever roamed the earth. And its story, it doesn't start with a roar or some epic battle. It starts with a single, silent bone.
So let's get right to it. What was the biggest snake that has ever existed? I mean, think about that for a second. For a really, really long time, the answer to that question was completely hidden from us, buried under millions of tons of rock, just waiting. Now, you'd think the answer would be found in some remote, untouched jungle, right? Nope. The clues actually started turning up deep inside the Cerrejón coal mine in Colombia. And get this, 60 million years ago, this place wasn't a mine at all. It was a massive, sprawling, tropical rainforest. So our whole detective story here really kicks off with that first piece of the puzzle, a mysterious bone that, honestly, nobody could quite figure out. And this wasn't some big, sudden eureka moment. Oh no. It started way back in 1994 when a geologist stumbled upon a weird-looking fossil and just kind of shrugged it off, thinking it was a petrified tree branch. Then, almost a decade later, another one pops up. For years, these incredible clues were literally just sitting in storage boxes. It wasn't until 2007, when they finally made their way to the Florida Museum of Natural History, that someone actually started to connect the dots.
And you can't blame them for being confused. The confusion was just total. When the experts first got their hands on this bone, they had no idea what they were looking at. Was it a crocodile? A turtle? I mean, someone even suggested a tree trunk again. The one thing that wasn't even on the radar? A snake. Okay, so this next part, this is where the story completely changes gears. This is the moment a really simple comparison revealed the true, and I mean mind-boggling, scale of this creature. This right here was the aha moment. At the museum, the paleontologist took the fossil and put it right next to a vertebra from a modern anaconda, one of the biggest snakes alive today. And the fossil wasn't just a little bigger, it was 3 times larger and way thicker. There was only one thing it could be: the vertebra of a snake of an absolutely unimaginable size.
So just how big are we talking? Well, using that one vertebra, scientists were able to calculate its total length. And the result was staggering. We're talking up to 50 feet. To put that in perspective, that's longer than a city bus and almost double the length of the biggest anacondas we have today. Just wow. And if you think the length is wild, its weight was even more incredible. We're talking about 1.2 tons. This thing wasn't just a long, slithery snake. It was immensely heavy, weighing in at 10 times more than a green anaconda. Yeah, 1.2 tons is kind of hard to picture, so let's try this. The Titanoboa weighed about the same as your average sedan. Let that sink in for a second. A snake as heavy as a car. I mean, that kind of mass is just completely impossible for any land snake today to support. No way. Okay, so this discovery didn't just tell us about some giant creature, it opened up a whole new can of worms, right? Like, how on earth did a snake get this big in the first place? And why in the world don't we see anything like it now? Well, the answer, it turns out, is all about the weather. So to really get a handle on its size, we have to talk about what an ectotherm is. Basically, snakes are what we call cold-blooded. That means they depend on their environment, on the sun, on warm air, to regulate their body temperature. Their metabolism, their energy, even how big they can possibly grow, it's all directly controlled by the heat around them. And that leads us to a pretty simple but really powerful biological rule. For an animal like a snake, an ectotherm, a consistently warmer climate just fuels a faster metabolism. And a faster metabolism, that means more energy, which means faster growth, and ultimately it means you can support a much, much, much bigger body. And believe me, Titanoboa's world was hot. In a really cool piece of scientific detective work, scientists basically used the snake's own giant size as a kind of prehistoric thermometer. They figured that for a snake to get this massive, the average temperature in its world had to be at least 32 degrees Celsius all year round. That constant, intense heat is what supercharged its growth potential and let it get so huge. All right, so we know how it got so big, but how did a creature this massive actually live? How did it hunt? Now, you should probably forget those Hollywood movie images of giant snakes just crashing through the jungle. The reality was a whole lot smarter.
And here's why Titanoboa was not some kind of land-based monster.
Out of the water, its 1.2-ton body would have been its own worst enemy. Gravity and friction alone would have made it incredibly slow and inefficient. And there was even a risk of it literally crushing its own internal organs under its own weight. So land was a no-go.
So it had to be a water hunter. The water supported that immense weight, which actually allowed it to be pretty agile. You have to picture it. It would hide in these murky swamps, perfectly camouflaged, just waiting, completely motionless for hours, maybe even days. And then when some giant turtle or a massive crocodile came to the water's edge to drink, bam, it would strike with incredible speed, constricting its prey with a force of 400 psi. To give you an idea, that's like having two full-grown elephants standing on your chest. Game over. For years, all the scientists had to go on were those vertebrae. But then, in 2011, they finally found a fossilized skull. And this was a total game changer. It proved that Titanoboa had a jaw that could dislocate, just like the snakes we know today, which allowed it to swallow the absolutely enormous prey that shared its ecosystem. So think about it. It was the perfect predator in the perfect environment. It had no real enemies. It was at the absolute top of the food chain. So what's the final mystery here? Where did it go? Why did the incredible reign of this titan finally come to an end? Well, the answer is both deceptively simple and incredibly powerful. The world changed. That hothouse climate that made this giant possible, it started to cool down. And what was once its greatest advantage, its perfect adaptation to extreme heat, suddenly became its fatal weakness. This cooling trend just set off a whole cascade of failures for the Titanoboa. I mean, a cooler climate meant a slower metabolism. A slower metabolism meant way less energy to hunt. The hot, humid swamps it depended on started to shrink and dry up. And, on top of all that, new competitors, mammals, were starting to show up and compete for the same food. The world's largest snake was basically left high and dry, with nowhere to go. So, the story of Titanoboa is just this incredibly powerful reminder of how fragile even the most dominant creatures on the planet can be. A change of just a few degrees in the global climate was enough to completely wipe a 1.2-ton titan off the face of the Earth. And that really leaves us with a big question, doesn't it? What can its ancient story teach us about the stability of our own world today?